I've come to the conclusion that on my own, I probably won't be able to afford a home in town.
We're in a community where our wages are lower than the nation, but our housing costs are much higher.
The American dream kind of dried up with the housing and lack of salary and income.
I could pay $480 a month just in gas.
I'm Missoula Mayor John Engen, and this is a house on 2nd Street where my parents raised my brother and me. It's a great neighborhood. We're close to McCormick Park, we're close to downtown Missoula, and we're close to Willard Elementary School, a short walk away. And the neighborhood was full of kids. One of the best parts was that my parents could afford the house. My dad was a printer, my mom stayed at home and took care of the family. They paid $14,500 for this house, and they were able to make a mortgage payment of less than $100 a month without expending their entire paycheck. Today they still live in the comfort of their own home, which doubles as a nest egg for them. That was the 1960s. Today's Missoula is not the same for young families or for anyone else looking for a home.
We spent probably a year looking for a home up here before we finally decided on this. We barely looked at all in the Missoula area for that because we knew immediately that it was way out of our price range, that we were not going to be able to find anything like what we have now anywhere close to Missoula. The couple places that we did look at were over $1 million. I mean, I would look online and be like, that's what I want. All right, maybe in my next life. There's no way I'm going to be able to afford that now.
This is an average price for everywhere. You know, it's half of what the places across the road are.
Eventually, we bought it for $233. So in a 7-year time frame, it went from $67 to $233 with essentially a new roof, a new floor in the barn, and a new roof on the house.
So it's a scary proposition to deal financially, you know, and make payments, especially when the market here is seeming like it's in California, but we're not getting California jobs and they're not California lifestyle. Like, it's still a long, cold, hard winter.
When you think about that, we're in a community where our wages are lower than the nation, but our housing costs are much higher than the nation.
Well, on a income of $54,000 at a 6% interest rate, which is the going rate right now through the Montana Board of Housing, that would limit them to about $165,000 sales price in a home. And I mean, I think we could sell those houses all day and all night, but there's just not a lot available in that price range.
You can't buy a 3-bedroom house on a first-time home buyer loan in Missoula. So we had to definitely be willing to make a lot of sacrifices. And, you know, sometimes I think I might have bit off more than I can chew, but I know that I can get it done.
People are in this community and trying to make it work. We need to provide incentives, programs, things that make it possible for those members of our community to live healthy, just like the rest of us.
I think it's a very scary process, and I think that many people are very discouraged in Missoula when it comes to purchasing a home and what they can qualify for and that mortgage payment and how much house they can actually get for their budget.
I saw 2 different times in Missoula where people at entry-level jobs could buy entry-level houses. And the one time was in 1972, where I bought a nice 2-story house for $19,000. Didn't even have a job yet. And now that house is worth $220,000, $230,000. Almost have to leave the county to find enough land with low enough prices that you could provide entry-level housing.
We have seen housing prices going through the roof. About 10 years ago, in '95, you had an average housing price of roughly $130,000. That is well over $200,000 now. And if you look at a chart comparing housing prices and total housing costs versus income available, there's a huge disconnect.
That American dream of a single-family detached home is moving further and further away from the entry-level people in Missoula. Their choice then is to go to a two-family home, which is a single building with two homes in it, and that's fast moving out of their reach. And then we go to multifamily, which is 3 or more. So we're talking 4-unit buildings, 5-unit, 6-unit, or 8-unit buildings that could be apartment homes and you simply rent. We need to be honest about this and come up with a solution so people have the opportunity to make the choice of whether to buy a dwelling unit, no matter whether it's single-family detached or in a multifamily building.
You know, one of the beauties of Missoula is that it's home to a variety of folks. People here are old and young, poor and rich, white collar and blue collar. They work as mechanics, doctors, teachers, store clerks, university professors, office staff, engineers, lifeguards, and a variety of other jobs. And we like that diversity. It makes our community real and interesting. But in the last couple of years, we've heard that recruiting employees is starting to become a challenge.
And it might be surprising to people that it's hard for people that are recruited by an engineering firm or a high-end technology firm. It's hard for those folks to find a place to live here. So after we show them Karis Park and take them around and show them what a great place to Missoula is to live, they go visit a realtor and find out they actually can't afford it on this good professional salary that they're being recruited for. This is a big issue if we want to build an entrepreneurial economy.
Wages for that type of talent, while competitive, I think become uncompetitive once you factor in the housing costs and you compare Missoula to some other communities, even metropolitan areas where housing can be substantially cheaper.
Employees remark to us their level of surprise and challenge to find affordable housing, despite being paid what they know to be market wages. I really wonder if we're just on the edge of having to take a more proactive stance relative to affordable housing. And we'd like to be part of some kind of community conversation or a solution to creating a strategy so that we don't have to lose potential new employees.
Things are changing now. We have officers coming in here that are getting paid an awful lot more money now than what we were paid in those days. And they're getting actually pretty good pay. But they're still in the situation that they cannot afford a home in Missoula on a single income.
I was kind of assuming that Missoula, it's a smaller town, smaller than Spokane from where I was at, and that the housing would probably be cheaper. I've come to the conclusion that on my own, I probably won't be able to afford a home in town and still be able to support myself.
Beginning teachers who come out of the University of Montana and go through the job recruitment fair are often siphoned off to other states that pay higher wages and have lower housing prices. And it breaks my heart to see those people having to go to Washington and California and Las Vegas and Wyoming in order to make a living.
In big American cities, you hear people talk about drive time and windshield time. That's not something that's been a household word for Montanans, but it's getting more common to hear people talk about their 1-hour drive or even longer. Some people want to live in the country, and that's fine. But when too many people have to commute a long way to work, it erodes our quality of life.
Everything's a drive.
Of course, with the price of gas now, people who think they're saving by buying a house 30 or 40 miles from Missoula discover once they drive back and forth for a year or so on the wear and tear on the vehicles and the gas prices that they're not saving money.
You know, if I drive my 85 truck that gets 10 miles to the gallon, I could pay $480 a month just in gas.
I was new to the area, living in Montana for 4 short years when I first moved here, and I just wasn't exploring Montana at all. You know, you'd get home after work and after a long commute, And the last thing that you want to do is drive into Missoula to participate in any sort of community events.
Teachers are better if they live in the community in which they teach. Teachers should be invested in their community. They should live here, participate in the economics, in the available arts and education opportunities, particularly in Missoula. And if you're living out of town, you spend an awful lot of time getting back and forth.
I think if we keep displacing people and make Missoula more and more a business center only, we all suffer, and we will probably then start losing things like the downtown events that are put on, especially in the summer, because it becomes uneconomical to commute a fairly long distance to participate in a 1 hour or 2 hour event in the evening.
It used to be we had a requirement to live within 4 air miles of the city limits. And due to the lack of affordable housing within that 4 air miles, it was changed to a 30-minute response time. And so now on Interstate 90 at 75 miles an hour, officers can live up to 30 minutes out, which puts you quite a ways out. You could actually live in Alberton.
The unfortunate thing is, typically, in the history of our department, our firefighters lived within the city limits. They lived in Missoula, and they were an integral part of Missoula and the community they protect. And that is something that is changing. Obviously, if somebody lives in Florence or Stevensville, they don't have the same ties to our community.
High housing prices affect more than our family budget. Now, my brother and I walked to Willard School when we were kids, but Willard is no longer the neighborhood school. Neither is Jefferson or Whittier or Central or half a dozen others. Neighborhoods aren't the same when housing prices are out of reach of young families and their children.
The American dream kind of dried up with the housing and lack of salary and income. So I would love to have an older house that has a basement and a washer and dryer that you don't have to put quarters into anymore, a yard, and a garage. You know, nothing huge, just something comfortable with trees. So that's my goal, but it seems like it's getting further and further away.
Me, I knew I wanted to live in Missoula area. It's where my community and kind of where my heart was set for a long time.
The faces of affordable housing are people that we meet every day when we go shopping and when we go to get our physical checkup, when we go to the restaurants and things like that.
We want to see people in our community stable. And we all love to live in Missoula, and we're all here for a reason. And if we don't have the people to work in hotels, motels, CNAs, young first-time teachers, bank tellers, people that work at the gas station, a whole number of what we call service-oriented employment, if we're not providing support for those people, both either through affordable rentals, but also through eventual home ownership, so they can build equity, buy a home, become a homeowner, move into middle class, we are losing out on why we love Missoula so much.
A lot of us who grew up in Montana have to leave home to make enough money to move back, and the thought that it's our workforce, they're our neighbors. It's not. We have to have that diversity that Betsy talked about with the type of housing, because it's impossible to think that the grocery store clerks, the bankers, the firemen, we can't survive as a community without them.
And when people understand that Missoula is a larger community than just their front porch or just their neighborhood, they'll take responsibility for that.
We all live here and we all have something to offer. But when you have a taste of that ownership, and when you have a stake in something that your hands are in and something that you're making better or you're contributing to, it really allows you to open up your field of view and view the whole town as a community instead of just bits and pieces.
You know, I think it's very unfortunate that people that work for the city can't afford to live in the city. I think that we should do all we possibly can to reverse that trend.
We've just heard from a lot of folks in a short time. They've told us that high and rising housing costs in Missoula are challenging us in recruitment of workers and in economic development. Our housing prices are changing the quality of life of our city and causing some folks to wonder whether they can stay here and call Missoula their home for living and for working. The price of a single-family home is now out of reach for more than 3/4 of us, and that's just not acceptable. If Missoula values housing affordability and the vitality and diversity that it brings to our community, we must take action. During my lifetime, the community has come together to clean up our air, to protect our sole source aquifer, and to preserve our open spaces. And I know that we're capable of bringing the same level of effort and cooperation to bear on our community's housing problems. We need to ask ourselves some important questions as a community, and I think we need to answer those questions as well. There's no cookie-cutter approach. So identifying who needs affordable housing in our community is one of the first steps in really trying to build a program in Missoula so that folks can achieve the American dream. We need to work together as a community to decide where affordable housing and some other housing is appropriate. We also need to talk about what it looks like. We're talking about homes that folks can be proud of, that appreciate and value, that add to community. And finally, we need to ask a difficult question: how do we as a community help pay for affordable housing? And these are all very challenging questions, but I think Missoula is up to the task, and we'll be continuing to talk with folks throughout the community so that more of us can participate fully in our community through equity in housing.